In the stillness of a Los Angeles summer night in 1997, an operation unfolded that would forever be remembered as one of the most audacious and meticulously planned robberies in American history. It was not a wild shootout, not a reckless gamble fueled by desperation. No, this was precision, patience, and insider knowledge used to perfection. It would go down in the books as the largest cash heist in US history. Over $18 million stolen from the Dunbar Armored facility, and it was carried out by a man who, on the surface, seemed like any other hard-working employee. That man's name was Alan Pace III. By day, Pace was a trusted employee of Dunbar Armored, a company responsible for transporting and securing vast amounts of cash flowing through Los Angeles. He worked as a safety inspector, a role that gave him unique access to the inner workings of the depot. He knew when the trucks would arrive, when the vault would be filled, how the security cameras rotated, and most importantly, where the blind spots were. But to his friends, Pace was more than just an employee. He was ambitious, charismatic, and seemed destined for something bigger than a 9-to-5 job. He carried with him an aura of confidence that drew others in. Yet beneath that charm, he harbored a dangerous ambition to commit a robbery, so flawless that it would leave authorities baffled for years. Unlike many criminals who stumble into opportunity, Pace engineered his chance. For months, he studied every detail of Dunbar's operations. He learned the routines of the guards, memorized the schedules of the cash deliveries, and even timed the rotation of the surveillance cameras. Every Friday night, he knew the depot would be at its most vulnerable, swollen with cash from banks, businesses, and armored deliveries throughout Los Angeles. But Alan Pace also understood something crucial. No one could pull off such a massive job alone. He would need a team men he could trust, men willing to risk everything for a payday unlike any other. He began quietly recruiting. Among his closest friends were Eugene Lamar Hill, Jr., Eric Damon Boyd, Freddie Lee McCrary, and brothers Thomas and James Johnson. They weren't professional criminals. They weren't mobsters or career thieves. They were ordinary men who, through their loyalty to Pace, were about to be pulled into a heist that would become the stuff of legend. Pace's plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. On the night of September 12, 1997, he led his crew into action, disguised in black clothing, armed with guns, and carrying masks. They drove to the Dunbar facility in Los Angeles. Pace had secured the keys, the knowledge, and the timing. The rest was execution. When they arrived, Pace used his insider knowledge to guide them past security and into the facility. They disabled guards quickly and efficiently, tying them up without unnecessary violence. It was over almost before it began. Inside the vault, the sight was overwhelming: stacks of cash, millions of dollars bundled and waiting for distribution. The men worked fast, guided by Pace's directions. They avoided marked bills, carefully selected high-denomination notes, and loaded bags upon bags into their vehicles. By the time they left, they carried $18.9 million in untraceable cash. The entire operation had taken less than 30 minutes. Not a single shot was fired. No alarms were triggered. It was, in every sense, the perfect inside job. When the employees of Dunbar Armored returned in the morning, chaos erupted. The vault was stripped bare, the guards humiliated, and the company stunned. The FBI was immediately called in, and a massive investigation began. But the thieves had left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints, no DNA, no forced entry. For weeks, then months, the authorities were baffled. It seemed the robbers had simply vanished with the cash. But the one weakness in Pace's plan was not the heist itself, it was human nature. At first, the crew stuck to the rules. They didn't flaunt their money. They didn't make flashy purchases. They waited. Pace, the mastermind, insisted that the cash had to be laundered slowly, carefully, to avoid drawing suspicion. But temptation gnaws at the edges of discipline, and cracks began to form. One of the men, Eugene Hill, made a critical mistake. He passed some of the stolen money to an associate, asking him to help launder it. That associate, realizing the bills matched the stolen Dunbar money, turned to the authorities. The FBI's break had come. Surveillance, wiretaps, and informants soon unraveled the conspiracy. One by one, the members of the crew were arrested. At the center of it all was Alan Pace, the so-called mastermind. When Pace was finally confronted, the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. His friends turned on him, testifying against the man who had once promised them untold riches. The dream of the perfect crime had collapsed. By the early 2000s, the entire crew had been convicted. Pace himself was sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. Others received lesser sentences depending on their role. But here's the most fascinating part. Even after the arrests, the majority of the stolen money was never recovered. Of the nearly $19 million stolen, only a fraction, about $5 million, was ever traced. The rest remains missing to this day, believed to have been hidden, spent, or laundered beyond recognition. The Dunbar Armored robbery stands as both a tale of brilliance and of downfall. It showed how insider knowledge can turn security into vulnerability, how patience and planning can achieve what brute force never could. But it also showed that no matter how perfect the plan, trusting human nature is always the weakest link. For years, law enforcement and journalists would look back on this crime as the ultimate what if. What if Hill hadn't made that mistake? What if the crew had stayed disciplined? Could the Dunbar robbery have been the one true perfect crime? In the end, it wasn't the FBI, the vaults, or the cameras that doomed the Dunbar crew. It was loyalty that fractured, greed that whispered too loudly, and trust that proved too fragile. Today, when people talk about the great robberies of history, the Dunbar case stands out, not for its violence, but for its audacity, not for its chaos, but for its control, and for the haunting fact that, somewhere out there, millions of dollars from that night may still be hidden, waiting to be discovered. So we return to that timeless question: can there ever truly be a perfect crime? Ellen Pace came closer than most, but in the end, even perfection proved mortal. Thank you for watching Crimes Through Time. If you found this story shocking, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most daring heists and haunting mysteries. And tell us in the comments, do you think the missing millions from the Dunbar robbery will ever be found? Or did the crew get away with hiding it for good? We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay curious, stay safe,